JD Vance goes back on Meet the Press with Kristen Welker, who obviously loves giving tough interviews only to Republicans or only to Donald Trump, and in this case, JD Vance, who is Donald Trump's running mate. She would never probably do this to Kamala or Tim Walz, which is crazy, but in a show of fierce, he goes back on there, and this time it's even worse than you thought. We're going to be breaking down this interview from beginning to end here when they get in a heated conversation and JD Vance calls her out on her lies and her network lies. Of course, that network lies. Make sure to smash the like button, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, JD Vance not running away from the press. JD Vance showing that he can handle the press better than most Americans at this point in politics. Let's get it started, ladies and gentlemen, because this starts off with a bang. Smash the like button. Let me know where you guys are watching from. Let's get it started.
Things that the Democratic Party has become too pro-censorship, that the Democratic Party, especially in the wake of COVID, became really anti-freedom and anti-child. I mean, you have Democrats saying that we should be masking toddlers in their schools, even though we knew it caused developmental disabilities. I agree with RFK that that was crazy.
Well, to be fair, there was a lot of information that scientists were grappling with as it came in, and masks were perceived to stop the spread of the disease. Let's move on.
Totally fair.
Yeah.
But the one thing before we move on that I would say on that is there were...
By the way, this is a tactic that she uses a lot. I noticed that the liberal mainstream media uses this tactic. Let's move on tactic after saying something like she just did. She's trying to cover her butt.
That scientists were grappling with as it came in, and masks were perceived to stop the spread of the disease. Let's move on.
Totally fair.
Yeah.
But the one thing before we move on that I would say on that is there were important leaders. Donald Trump was among them. RFK was among them, who were saying some of this stuff is crazy. And if we had listened to them, I think our kids would have been much better off in the wake of the pandemic.
I mean, scientists did show that masks help to stop the spread of the disease. Let's talk about another big issue.
Disabilities for toddlers, right? We have to be able to balance this stuff. And I think the way that RFK struck that balance was much smarter, unfortunately, than the way that Kamala Harris did.
Let's talk about another big issue. Was talked about at the Democratic National Convention. It's being talked about on the campaign trail. Abortion.
Sure.
Democrats made the case this week and beyond this week that Donald Trump, if elected, will impose a federal ban on abortion if he wins. Now, Donald Trump says he won't, but can you commit, Senator, sitting right here with me today, that if you and Donald Trump are elected, that you will not impose a federal ban on abortion?
I can absolutely commit that, Kristen. And Donald Trump has been as clear about that as possible. I think it's important to step back and say, what has Donald Trump actually said on the abortion question, and how is it different from what Kamala Harris and the Democrats have said? Donald Trump wants to end this culture war over this particular topic. If California wants to have a different abortion policy from Ohio, then Ohio has to respect California and California has to respect Ohio. Donald Trump's view is that we want the individual states and their individual cultures and their unique political sensibilities
to make their own decisions. Democrats fear-mongering the rest of Americans with this. JD Vance going off.
To make these decisions because we don't want to have a nonstop federal conflict over this issue. The federal government ought to be focused on getting food prices down, getting housing prices down, issues, of course, where Kamala Harris has been a total disaster. So I think Donald Trump is right. We want the federal government to focus on these big economic and immigration questions. Let the states figure out their own abortion policy.
Let me just follow up with you a little bit on that point, because I've been talking to Republicans, including Senator Lindsey Graham just last week, who've made it very clear that if Donald Trump is elected, if you are elected, they will continue to press this point. Senator Graham said to me, I'm going to keep saying that there should be a federal ban. If such a piece of legislation landed on Donald Trump's desk, would he veto it?
Well, I think it'd be very clear he would not support it. I mean, he said that explicitly. Yeah, I mean, if you're not supporting it as the president of the United States, you fundamentally have to veto it.
So he would veto a federal abortion
ban. Bro, he's answering the question. I mean, these people are annoying. First of all, linking Lindsey Graham and Donald Trump in the same, it's not the same. Nobody likes Lindsey Graham.
I think he would. He said that explicitly that he would. And
I don't think he's ever said explicitly he would. He said that to you?
Lindsey Graham, Kristen, I would be surprised. I mean, again, I need to see the context on what Lindsey Graham said, because Lindsey Graham himself has not advocated a federal abortion ban. Lindsey Graham has advocated a federal minimum standard. Now, to be clear, that is not Donald Trump's view. Donald Trump disagrees with Lindsey Graham on this, but no Republican, at least no Republican with any reasonable power, is saying that we should have a complete national abortion ban. I haven't heard that from any of my colleagues. And to be clear, Donald Trump, I think, has staked his position and made it very explicit. He wants this to be a state decision. States are going to make this determination themselves.
All right, let's talk about women voters more broadly. The Census Bureau estimates there are 22 million women between the ages of 20 and 40 who, for whatever reason, do not have children. What do you say to those women who hear some of your comments, including the childless cat lady comments, which you've been asked about, but who
Here we go with the same childless cat stuff.
feel as though you won't represent them?
Well, I'd say, first of all, I will represent you. I want to be the vice president for the whole country, and I want to represent everybody. And yes, I made a sarcastic comment years ago that I think that a lot of Democrats have willfully misinterpreted. But what I've simply said is that I think that it's really a profound change that's happened in our country where we become anti-family, and I would like to change that. And I think if you talk to young women, whether they have children or don't want to have children, what you consistently hear is that a lot of young women feel like they don't have options. I saw this with my own wife, who's a working mother, who's a very, very accomplished litigator. She has 3 beautiful kids and always felt like she was having to balance being a good mom with being the kind of litigator that she wanted to be. I just want women to have more choices. I've seen that very personally in my own family, and I think it's something that is broken about our country.
Let me zoom out a little bit. Then
Please.
you're calling it a sarcastic comment,
Sure.
and yet some women, and you got the feedback in real time, felt like it was a gut punch to them personally. Do you regret making that comment?
Look, I regret certainly that a lot of people took it the wrong way, and I certainly regret that the DNC and Kamala Harris lied about it.
But do you
look,
regret what you said, Senator?
Look, Kristen, I'm going to say things.
Oh my God, bro. Would they ever be this crazy toward Kamala? Like, they would never. Like, this is a comment he made years ago.
Regret certainly that a lot of people took it the wrong way, and I certainly regret that the DNC and Kamala Harris lied about it.
But do you regret what you said, Senator?
Look, Kristen, I'm going to say things from time to time that people disagree with. I'm a real person. I'm going to make jokes. I'm going to say things sarcastically. And I think that what's important is that we focus on the policy. There are certainly going to be things that I say. If I'm elected vice president, people are going to say, well, I wish he had said that differently. I think it's most important to actually be the person I actually am and to say, those sarcastic comments were made in the service of a real substantive point. This country has become too anti-family. It's too expensive to afford a house. It's too expensive to afford groceries. Donald Trump and I want to change that. And unless we get better leadership, we're not going to.
But again, just very quickly, given that people have told you directly, have spoken out, have said that they were offended, they were hurt by those comments, do you wish you never made those childless cat lady comments?
Bro, you don't hate the media enough. We could be spending this time talking about policy, talking about, what's going on in the Middle East. How can we make the world a better place? The United States of America a better place? Childless cat ladies? Really? This is what we're focused on right now?
I think that it's much more important for me to just be a normal human being who sometimes says things that people disagree with. I have a lot of regrets, Kristen, but making a joke 3 years ago is not in the top 10 of the list.
All right. Another big topic in this race is immigration. There has been a lot of discussion about Donald Trump's plans for mass deportation.
Yeah.
According to one estimate, more than 11 million U.S. citizens live in households with mixed immigration status, including more than 5 million children. If you and former President Trump were elected, would you separate families as a part of your mass deportation effort?
Well, we have to start with the foundational issue here, which is we have 25 million illegal aliens in this country right now because Kamala Harris has refused to do her job.
I have to very quickly, DHS says it's much lower. It's closer to 8 million. I don't know. Where do you get the 25 million from?
Well, I think the 25 million.
Oh, are you crazy? Like 8 million? That's, even if that was the number, which we know we just know it's not. We know it's a lot more, most likely. But 8 million, she says it like it's nothing. Even if it's 25, 8 million is nothing.
Million are the people that should have been deported that maybe weren't deported. Plus, you had another 12 to 15 million that have come in since Kamala Harris. Look,
DHS
whatever the number is,
that number for the record. They say it's closer to 8 to 10 million.
But I think there are reasons to think that DHS is underestimating. Whatever the real number is, it's way too high, right? It's millions upon millions of illegal immigrants that have come in just since Kamala Harris became the border czar a few years ago.
She was put in charge of the root causes of migration.
Well, the root causes of migration, I would say, Kristen, is that Kamala Harris refuses to do her job as borders are. And let's just start there. I want to answer your question, but I think it's important to sort of sequence this in the right way. So if you want to get control of the illegal immigration problem, you have to stop the bleeding. You have to stop so many people from coming here illegally in the first place. And that means undoing everything that Kamala Harris did practically on day one of the administration. You have to reimpose deportations. You have to stop catch and release, stop granting asylum to every single person who comes in here and says that they need asylum, and stop granting mass parole. These policies are why we have the immigration crisis that we have. So I think focus on fixing the problem. Before we even fix the problem, we've got to stop the problem from getting worse.
And as you know, President Biden passed a series of executive actions, and illegal border crossings are now at their lowest levels in about 5 years, so much so that Greg Abbott is no longer busing people to other.
Bro, this guy, like, it doesn't get worse than this. I gotta be honest. I don't know how JD does it. I wouldn't go on the show. Like, look at the way she's fighting back on all of this is just ridiculous. It's like they're trying to gaslight and make you really think that things are not bad, that things are okay, that New York City is okay, Minnesota is okay, St. Louis is okay, Chicago is okay. Like, no, it's a problem. We have to fix it. But it's like, oh, we'll just throw a little Band-Aid on it. It's election season. Let's act like this problem is actually going very good.
Out their lowest levels in about 5 years, so much so that Greg Abbott is no longer busing people to other cities. But let me ask you this fundamental question, please. Fundamental question. Will families be separated under your mass deportation?
And again,
oh my God. Oh, no, he does it. I don't know. Like, this is crazy.
Abbott is no longer busing people to other cities. But let me ask you this fundamental question, please. Fundamental question. Will families be separated under your mass deportation?
And again, because you made a point here, I do want to answer this question about families and about deportations. But you made this point that border crossings are lower. Border crossings at the southern border are lower because the Harris administration is sending more immigrants through the ports of entry. So instead of coming through the southern border, they're now being flown at taxpayer expense to the ports of entry all over our country. The number of illegal crossings, Kristen, this is a really important point. They're not any lower. They're just shuffling how the people are coming into the country in the first place. And this is very important.
They're able to process them more efficiently, but Greg Abbott's not setting them to other
Kristen,
states.
I don't want a border czar who makes it more efficient for illegal immigrants to come into this country. That's why we have the problem that we have.
Senator, to this question, because so many people want to know the answer to this.
See, she lost there. He cooked her. He literally just exposed in front of millions of people, right, how they're coming in now, which is why they're lower. But she still wants to go back to the family thing because she knows that that is the emotional pull for people, right? All the white liberals and all the Hispanic liberals and all the liberals watching this interview, they didn't really hear that last part. They don't care about our security. They just stopped caring about security. They stopped caring about the border. They stopped caring about all these things. Once you involve family, once you involve race, once you involve abortions, religion, that's what she's doing here. And that's why what JD Vance just did is super important, but unfortunately is going to pass over. It's going to fly over a lot of people's heads. He literally just exposed the statistical fact of why the border crossings are lower because they're making it easier for them to come in. But she goes back to, well, let's not focus on that. Let's focus on the families. Are you going to separate the families? Because she knows emotionally that grasps people more. Humans become emotional over that. So they start overlooking their security over the fact that some families may be separated because of these decisions that were made by Democrats. Crazy.
I don't want a border czar who makes it more efficient for illegal immigrants to come into this country. That's why we have the problem that we have.
Senator, to this question, because so many people want to know the answer to this. Will families be separated under your mass deportation policy?
Here's another thing. 40,000 children missing, 80,000 missing children. How many children are missing? Let's talk about that. You guys care so much about families and children. Talk about how many children go missing each and every year coming over here.
Immigrants to come into this country. That's why we have the problem that we have.
Senator, to this question, because so many people want to know the answer to this. Will families be separated under your mass deportation policy?
I think that families are currently being separated, and you're certainly going to have to deport some people in this country. Now, I think you start with I think you start with the most violent criminals in our country. Those people need to deported. That's where you focus federal resources. I think you, of course, have a number of children who are currently living with drug cartel members, not actually their families. We need to, of course, find their families and get them back to their families. But it's very interesting here because what Kamala Harris says is that Donald Trump wants to separate families. Kamala Harris's policies have led to thousands upon thousands of migrant children living with sex traffickers and drug cartels.
Well,
that is the consequence of her policies.
But there's not a policy.
Boom! Whew. Too sharp. Too sharp.
Sex traffickers and drug cartels.
Well,
that is the consequence of her policies.
But there's not a policy to separate families. There's not a policy to separate families.
If,
the question
if you
is,
know that your policies will lead to family separation, you don't get to claim. Kristen, this is important.
Wait, hold on.
Kamala Harris cannot claim that she doesn't know that her policies are leading to family separation. They are, and everybody knows it, and she has to take responsibility for that. That's what real leadership is.
There are some families who have been separated, as you say, some because their parents are criminals. But of course, under the Trump administration, there was a zero tolerance policy, which is an actual policy. But let's move on.
No, please,
because we're running out of time.
Point, Kristen, because this is so important.
We are running out of time.
There was a zero. I'll give you more time. There was a zero tolerance policy during the Trump administration, and that led to less family separation than under Kamala Harris's border policies. That's what's so striking about this. Actually enforcing our border is the most humane thing for children and certainly for American citizens.
But I don't hear you denying that families will be separated. Let's move on to something that Donald Trump.
Oh my God, I would have. Oh, that's so bad. Oh, these people are so bad. They're so bad. They're so bad. If you look at the comments and the reports and what JD Vance is saying is 1000% true. Children are already missing now. Your network doesn't talk about how many children are being trafficked, how many children are actually missing, the cartels. Your network never talks about that. Specifically NBC. You are focused on making these guys the bad guys when they're literally telling you the truth. I've heard it from Dr. Phil, the DHS, Oscar Al Blue. We've had him on the channel before, speaking of these issues. Like, these are the worst type of people. What she just did here is why you should. This is why the mainstream liberal media is the worst.
Actually enforcing our border is the most humane thing for children and certainly for Americans.
Yes.
But I don't hear you denying that families will be separated. Let's move on to something that Donald Trump said in North Carolina and yet again Friday night. He said, quote, "Our primary focus is not to get out the vote. It's to make sure they don't cheat because we have all the votes you need. You can see it." Why is Donald Trump casting doubt on the election before it's even happened?
I don't think that's what Donald Trump is doing.
Well, that's what he's doing. That's what he says here. We need to make sure they don't cheat.
I think that what he's saying is that we want to pursue a set of policies in the Republican Party that make it easier for every legal ballot to be cast and counted, but make it harder for illegally cast ballots to be counted. Now, we can disagree about how many of those there are, whether there are a few hundred, a few thousand, maybe more, but just in the last week, okay? So just in the last week, once in Arizona and once in Pennsylvania, there were major court wins that make our ballot process more secure and more effective. I think that's what Donald Trump is talking about, is we have to pursue, sometimes through litigation, sometimes through better policy at the state or national level, a set of rules that make sure every ballot is legally counted.
Well, it's very different from your message, which is you said, and I'll quote you back to yourself, we have to work as hard as possible to persuade Americans to vote for us. Are you on the same page as Donald Trump? Because again, he seems to be casting doubt on the results of the election before it's even happened.
Of course, we're on the same page, Kristen. We talk all the time, and I guarantee you, if you sat here and said, Mr. President, Donald Trump, do you believe that we need to do, that your campaign needs to persuade voters as much as possible? Of course he's going to say yes. That's not inconsistent with thinking that we need to pursue a set of approaches that make sure legal ballots get counted, illegal ballots don't get counted.
Do you have faith the 2024 election will be free and fair?
I do, Kristen. I do think it's going to be free and fair, and we're going to do everything that we can to make sure that happens. We're going to pursue every pathway to make sure, again, legal ballots get counted. But I feel very good about where we are. I think we're going to win this race, and I think we're going to win it in a very good election.
All right. Senator JD Vance.
Thanks, Kristen.
Thank you so much for your time.
Okay, so the smiles, the head nod shows you exactly why a lot of people are wrong about JD Vance and Donald Trump. They sat there, they did this tough interview where somebody is legitimately just lying for their billionaire donors and lying for their billionaire company. aka NBC here. And it just lets you know where we're at in this country with the media. The media is supposed to be the most lenient folks. They're supposed to make you feel that this is not biased. We're not biased. We're listening and we're asking questions because we care about the American people, not because we have an agenda. Unfortunately, the media lost that war a long time ago, which somebody said, she's the reason why I'm famous. She's the reason why a whole bunch of channels on YouTube are thriving, because people are sick and tired of not getting real news from people that they're supposed to get real news from. And I got to say, shout out to JD Vance, handled this like a professional. But man, this is one of the main reasons why a lot of channels are thriving. Because when you want to get the real stuff, you just search for it. Don't even go watch NBC no more. Unfortunately for them, that's why they're all losing money. Crazy. Ladies and gentlemen, make sure to smash the like button. Let me know what you guys think about this crazy interview, a new interview. This is the second time they sat down, if I'm not mistaken. This time was much worse than the first one. Hopefully we get stuff like this, because I can't wait. I'll do a reaction video from Kristen Welker asking these tough questions to Tim Walz and Kamala Harris. I would love to see an interview like that. I'll see you guys on the next one, man.